Hello and welcome to another edition of your favorite parliamentary news magazine program, The Chamber, right here on City TV. My name is Duke Mensopoko. It's a pleasure to be bringing this program to you once again this week. We'll take a break here. When I come back, we'll set the ball rolling in this edition. Stay with us. You're welcome back from the break. This is still The Chamber right here on City TV. And it's been a packed week in Parliament. Of course, the House, through the Speaker, had its first ever seminal public lecture, but that did not take away from the major issues the House had to deal with by way of motions, reports from committees, and the rest. So the very best of Parliament is curated for you this week on the recap segment. Last week, there was a seeming standoff between the Speaker and the leadership of the majority over the financial problems of Parliament. However, at Tuesday's sitting, the majority leader attributed the disagreement to miscommunication and explained why he contradicted the utterances of the Speaker. The Speaker threw more light on the extent of the financial challenges facing Parliament.
But for the first quarter, Parliament was to be given 54 million to enable us implement the program for the first quarter. We were actually given 7 million. Then, with the information that the majority leader has given, the money that he just mentioned, which I also mentioned on Friday, the 25 million that was released is part of our arrears of 84 million for last year. That is what has been released. Last year, at the closure of the year, we were owed about 84 million. And so it's part of this that they have released as 25 million. We are giving you this information so that leadership and speakership are not blamed for not responding positively to the requests of members and committees to transact their business. It's because the there is not there.
Later, the minority leader Haruna Iddrisu at a press briefing indicated that the side would refile an urgent motion for a probe into COVID-19 expenditure following fresh evidence it had gathered.
As much as we feel vindicated, we are further scandalized, and we are calling on President Nana Addo Dankwa and reminding him that the 1992 Constitution is premised on probity and accountability, and that if he has any respect for the values of integrity, let him probe COVID and COVID spending across the country. But we are to believe for now and conclude that the Felicia evidence is good evidence.
On the rising incidence of violent crime in the north following the killing of a lawyer over the weekend, MP for Salaga North, Al-Hassan Idi, called for enhanced security in that part of the country.
There are two prescriptions. One has to do with the fact that we need to beef up our security because we've been hearing possible terrorist attacks. The security is doing very well. We haven't heard, but these are red lights. These are red lights that government needs to take into consideration. The security apparatus need to beef up their strength. The other prescription is that the community need to assist in giving out information to the security agency to be able to work in our interests.
The Defense and Interior Committee was tasked to investigate the matter when the incident occurred in Wa in July 2021. It presented its report on the floor on Wednesday. After the debate, the Speaker expanded the remit of the committee's work and issued some directives.
I think that the House should take that to heart and give notice, strong notice, to not only the military, but all security agencies, that we will no longer entertain any brutalities to any civilian or any person in this country. the law is there to be enforced. We will not. And I will further direct that the committee should go forward and take reports of all the commissions that have been set up by government to investigate all those cases and bring them to this house. We can't continue this way. We are getting to 2024 elections. And if we don't stamp out these things, please, I'll be having nightmares.
Also, the Minister for Western Housing, Francis Senso-Boakye, answered questions in Parliament on the construction of a sea defence wall at Blekusu to deal with tidal waves.
In my previous response to this same question to this August House, I indicated that the Ministry of Western Housing noted the urgent need to undertake the second phase of the Blekusu Coastal Protection Project and therefore commissioned technical feasibility study focused on Blekusu community to enable Mrs. Amandi continue with the second phase of the project. However, Mr. Speaker, in accordance with the Public Financial Management, Public Investment Management Regulation, LI 2411, a more comprehensive feasibility study is now required. In that direction, the Minister for Works and Minister for Finance, in the 2022 budget statement, allocated 10 million cedis towards a comprehensive feasibility studies of Blekusu and the surrounding communities. Subsequently, my ministry is engaging Ministry of Finance for the release of the funds to enable the Hydrological Service Department undertake additional feasibility.
The MP who posed the question, Jifa Ablagomashi, is however not pleased with the answer.
I reminded the Minister for Works and Housing that if he needed anything to refresh his memory, he could go to citynewsroom.com, where he will find his own message on or his own response to my question last year, and the emphatic and specific time period within which he indicated that the work will start. He went further to come to the constituency and in front of myself, the traditional leaders, the chief fisherman, Mr. Num, Togbi Adama, the Makoso of the Sume traditional area, and assured us that we were going to see Amandi return at the end of the year 2021. So for the minister to want to latch on to what Honorable Harry Nedrisu said last year was really shocking to me, and that's why I needed him to perhaps come back again with a different answer, which will be more acceptable. Because if you're doing a project and you do a phase 1 and you're doing a phase 2, I don't know why they should bunch it all together and say that that LI is going to be the reason why a new feasibility study should be done.
Bole Bamboy MP Yusuf Sulemana is the latest to weigh in on matters relating to insecurity in northern Ghana. He has some proposed solutions for government.
I have suggested that, look, let's put an eye on the boundary between La Côte d'Ivoire and Ghana in my area. There's a place called Dollar Power. From Dollar Power through to Intereso, from Intereso to Chache, from Chache up to the Solatuna Kalba. That whole stretch is very porous. So many unapproved routes that people use to get into the constituency. And I think that the military should come in, national security should come in.
The Lands and Forestry Committee of the House exercises oversight responsibility over the Lands and Natural Resources Ministry. In its latest action, the committee has summoned the Minister for Lands and Natural Resources, Samuel Abdullahi Jinapo, over the recent return of state lands to traditional authorities and some families. Here is the ranking member of the committee, Abdul Rashid Pelpo.
Authorities concerned about keeping government land are showing unaccountability in the usage of the land. We are all aware of the Achimota land issue. Whilst we are still thinking about it, other issues are coming up. Our lands again in Kumasi and other regional capitals. These concerns have gotten to the point that we think that we need to talk about it, we need to investigate them, and we need to get the minister to respond to issues that we are bringing up.
Till date, the National Cathedral project divides opinions across the country. Government, however, insists the project is a national priority. But the minority on Thursday raised fresh questions about the project following leaked documents from the Ministry of Finance suggesting an additional allocation to the project. Samuel Okujeto Blackwise, MP for North Town.
You see how it is shrouded in such shadiness, such corruption, opacity, and clear, blatant corruption. That is why we are not going to be silent and accept this. We will not accept it. We also want to bring to your attention that today we have filed urgent questions. The Honorable Kwame Agboja and I have filed 3 urgent questions on this matter.
Parliament has constituted a bipartisan committee to probe the death of Augustina Awoche, a pregnant lady who died in transit from Takoradi to Accra due to alleged negligence of the National Ambulance in December 2021. The committee was formed after debate on a private member's motion filed by 3 members of the minority. The 6-member committee will be chaired by MP for Efijasia Sokore, Dr. Ayu Afriye. Hello and welcome back from the break. This is From the Floor segment. This week, my guest is an engineer turned economist and public financial management professional. He currently is the Finance Committee Chairman of Parliament, probably, arguably, the most powerful committee of the House, and is MP for Obuasi West. Kwaku Agyeman Kwarteng is my guest. Welcome, sir.
Thank you, and welcome to my office.
Good. How has it been settling in as a chairman of the committee? It's a committee that is I would say is the most hardworking committee, because most of the things Parliament consider are financial in nature, from tax waivers to loan agreements to other referrals that are made to the committee. How has it been steering the affairs of the committee?
Well, it's been about a year and a half, so we have settled in. Plus, I had been a member of the committee
yes.
In my first term in Parliament, so I'm kind of used to the work they do. So we've settled in, and we are trying to see how best we can deliver on the mandate for which the committee has been instituted by the Constitution.
Most of the time, one of the criticisms the Finance Committee gets is how quick it works on some of these agreements and loans. For instance, you have these loan agreements, huge documents, and within a matter of hours, the committee works on them, brings it to Parliament, and it's passed. It's something you get a flag for a lot from civil society, who sometimes question the kind of due diligence that gets into the work that is done on some of these reports and agreements.
Yeah, that is a concern expressed in respect of the work by all the committees of Parliament. In fact, in the Finance Committee, we probably take a lot more time than it is made to appear on the referrals that are made to us. But I think some of those referrals that have to be treated quickly happened like that because the work themselves delay in coming to Parliament.
Okay, true.
So they'll get to Parliament and you have a prayer by the sponsors, the executive, that this thing has to be worked on quickly. Yeah. And of course, as I have witnessed, the people in opposition would always complain. And then those wanting to push government business would always say, look, in the interest of the country, let's get this done. But it's a concern we all share, and I think we are trying to improve that. In fact, the exemptions bill has just been considered by the committee.
Yeah, I remember it was brought in, withdrawn, relayed, and
yes.
we're working on it.
And we did put an advert, we received some memos, we invited the people who had submitted those memos, and we took time to really digest the bill.
You've already done the consultations.
Yes, in fact, we've done the committee work, and we'll be presenting our report on the floor this month, And hopefully, it's not a very big bill, even though there are many far-reaching provisions in that.
It's because a lot of, people, when people who are advocates for raising local revenue talk about ways through which government can do that, they point to the number of tax exemptions.
They always point to the exemptions. The idea is to tidy up the whole tax exemptions regime. So we will be presenting our report to the plenary, and hopefully we should get it passed. I say this to make the point that normally we would take our time and look at the referral, but where there is pressure that in the national interest, some particular referral has to be treated quickly. Maybe it's a facility that has some time bounds, then we are all tempted to go along with government. And that is why you see that in spite of the government in power. So what we continue to urge on the executive is that bring these things early so you won't have to push us to get the agreements or the referrals treated under some kind of urgency. I hope that as we move on, we are able to improve the way we do our work.
Okay, right. We've just spoken about exemptions and the nature of how the country loses money, resources through these many tax exemption regimes. Another report this week emerged from a civil society group, a think tank, Imani, on the financial recklessness in the government sector. Pegs it around 13.9 billion cedis over a 5-year period from 2015 to 2018, with the Auditor General's report as source document. You've worked in the oversight arm, which is Parliament. You've had a practical feel of working in a ministry which notoriously was quoted as the ministry with the highest level of financial recklessness, the Ministry of Finance. First of all, how did this report? What do you make of this report?
Well, to start with, I think we need to clarify the point about the Ministry of Finance being
its agencies,
and its agencies being the worst culprit in this, what they call financial recklessness. Now, the Ministry of Finance is actually two animals in one. You have the Ministry of Finance that is an ordinary MDA. So they procure services, they procure cleaners to clean their offices, they buy stationery, the same way other ministries operate. So if you're really looking to compare the financial actions and inactions of ministries, then you compare that part of the Ministry of Finance with the other ministries. But there is a second animal, and a probably more important animal within the Ministry of Finance, which is the center of government treasury. And that Ministry of Finance does business on behalf of everybody. So if there may be an irregularity you may cite, for instance, the GRA. The GRA is an MDA because it does the things I have spoken about, but the GRA collects revenue from the citizenry in various sectors. And sometimes in a particular sector, a service provider may not even have charged VAT. The GRA, it will come to the attention of the GRA after the irregularity has happened. Who really is responsible? Maybe it's the sector agency. But to the extent that it has to do with taxation, you attribute it to GRA. So the long and short of it is that if you take any Ministry of Finance in any country at any point in time and you do this kind of research, you're going to come out with the outcomes that the money came out with, namely that the Ministry of Finance and its agencies, both as an MDA and the center of government treasury, would always have the most irregularities.
So that's two ministries in one.
Kind of.
I think in some countries they even separate the treasury function from the finance function.
Well, even if it was treasury, you're always going to have a part of the ministry that must do the normal things that any state entity will do. So that is what I have to say in respect of the ranking. But I have to also make the point that the fundamental issues in the work that we are discussing are still important. I mean, whether it is done by Ministry of Finance or by some other agency, so long as it's within our economy, it is worth discussing. My own view is that this breach of financial controls within the public sector is almost becoming a chronic culture, where people think they can violate these controls, there won't be any consequences, and then life goes on. People will do that for two main reasons. One, sometimes they just find the financial controls too burdensome.
Yeah.
That it's maybe you want some small money, or you need to spend some small money, you need to go to PPA, you may have to go to Parliament, and they just look at all that and they try to find a quick way around. Then the Auditor General picks these things up and says somebody has done the wrong thing. The second is people who really want to steal from the purse. So they circumvent the rules because they really want to steal from the public purse. Now, it's a mixture of the two, and it is becoming, for me, chronic. And I think, given the hostile external environment and the increasing burden on us as a people to look within, to raise revenues, to finance our needs as a people, maybe it's time to do some extraordinary things in respect of these matters. I have made the point, I'll make it again. I think it will be helpful for the courts, our judiciary. Maybe there should be our judiciary, the police, and the other public sector entities that deal with these irregularities, both in revenue mobilization and in expenditures, to have a kind of revolution that says when it comes to matters relating to the country's revenues and how public financial management rules have been treated, it is a special case. The same way that after September 11, the United States decided that matters relating to the peace of the country and the fight against terrorism, some individual freedoms would have to be taken away in order that we can protect the collective good. I think we have come to a point where your issues go to the courts and they are not treated like just any other issue. And I say this because I have worked in the Ministry of Finance. I work closely with the Ghana Revenue Authority. And it is not that some of these irregularities, they don't try to correct them. You want to prosecute tax evaders, they will have their lawyers, they will go to the court, they will apply all the technicalities, they will frustrate. Sometimes you have the police people involved, they're supposed to investigate matters, it drags, and all that, for me, creates a fertile environment within which people get compromised. So revenue officers get frustrated. Along the line, they just want to.
Are you asking for special courts, tax courts, for instance?
I'll be happy to see that.
Would get fast-track prosecution if they evade taxes. If it's got to do with tax irregularity, we know that it's a matter that's dear to the finances of the country, so we are doing that.
The signal must go out to everybody that court, when you go there, it's not business as usual. It's not business as usual. And it is not just the courts. I also think that the police must treat revenue matters especially, but generally public finance management breaches with a special attention. Unless we're able to do that as a country, to the extent that these financial irregularities bring illegitimate benefit to people, the culture would not stop. And we're going to have year after year, governments after governments, the culture will be there. If you look at the report, they say in some years we did better. In 2015, in 2017, we did better and all that. But the truth is, the culture is there. It depends on how many of those irregularities the Auditor General can uncover, then it would look like in some years it was better. But I think in reality, the culture is there. It probably is getting worse, I don't know. The only thing I can say is that unless as a country we devised new, if you like, some emergency arrangements and some radical treatment of these irregularities, we are going to find it difficult to mobilize sufficient domestic revenue, and we're always going to have to rely on borrowing, especially as the desire and the demand for public services grow. People want roads, they want this. If we can't mobilize sufficient domestic revenue, government is always going to have to borrow. And when that happens, your city begins to take a hit, and then it leads to more poverty.
But within Parliament's architecture, there is the structure of the Public Accounts Committee, which is supposed to unearth some of these things.
Yes.
But there are certain practices within the committee that people complain about. For instance, most of the reports that are considered are not considered an account. So you have a Public Accounts Committee considering reports from 2017, 2018, 2019, when we are in 2022.
Yeah.
Sometimes people who have allegedly embezzled funds are on retirement. Some of them have left the country because of this time lag in the consideration of these reports. Again, the real power of the Public Accounts Committee to be able to deal with these people when it comes to matters of the law. You may not be speaking for the committee, but within the general framework of how Parliament is supposed to deal with this problem, is the House, well positioned to do that?
I have spoken with the people in the Public Accounts Committee a number of times on some of these matters. They themselves have their own frustrations because you uncover irregularities, you ask the agency sometimes to just correct them, you want to apply some disciplinary actions. In the end, it is the system, our penal administration system, that must do this.
Okay.
If the person is doing what is wrong, the Public Accounts Committee may uncover it. They would have, of course, the Auditor General would have uncovered it. It will be brought to the attention of the Public Accounts Committee. Parliament even has further powers to set up special committees where necessary. But all these can only work as committees. Those who really administer punishment and create the kind of deterrence that we need to correct the culture that we're worried about is to have our police and the courts and those who can actually punish, to have them treat these matters as special areas.
Okay.
So yes, I wouldn't disagree that maybe Parliament would have to speed up the treatment of these reports that come to us more quickly. That is a good call, but that in itself will not solve the problem.
Okay.
The problem goes back to a certain national consensus that when it comes to domestic revenue, that is our September 11, and certain freedoms would have to be foregone in order that we can fight this frontally.
Okay, let's come back to your committee. There's 75 million euro facility that you considered reported to the House about, but a question was not put. The Speaker issued a caveat asking the Minister for Finance to come and account. It's essentially got to do with the COVID response program. The concern was one, the fact that for many COVID is a non-issue now. Two, there has not been the required accountability from government to the House in terms of all the monies that have been approved for Parliament to utilize, for the government to utilize. Sorry.
Well, sometime last year, I think our colleagues from the minority side filed a motion seeking to get Parliament to set up a committee of politicians to audit the COVID expenditures. And many of us took the view that it was not the way to go. COVID expenditures are not the only expenditures that could be subject to financial irregularities, and therefore to focus on it especially when there are institutions such as the Auditor General who are more professional, who can examine receipts, who can follow up, and for me in particular, but for us as the majority, wasn't the way to go. And I was happy when the Speaker took the view that that couldn't be done. And that if anybody has concerns, we should look at the audit of the COVID expenditures by the Auditor General. And if there are issues arising, the PAC can deal with it. If they have issues, any member of Parliament is allowed to file a motion for Parliament to invoke its powers under Article 184 of the Constitution and set up a special committee to do. We have all those tools at our disposal. So a special audit by politicians was definitely out of place. Now, what happened subsequently was this COVID response facility, which for me is a very cheap facility. A cheap facility in the sense that a large part of it is grant. The terms are extremely good.
From the European Investment Bank?
Yes. Okay. Now, for somebody like me, I hope that such a facility will not be subject to the kind of response it got on the floor.
But what was the money even going to be used for? We don't.
The money was going to be
buy nose mask anymore. We don't use all of those things. You know.
Yeah, but the money was going to be used to when people have COVID, the oxygen administration facilities, and the facility is not just for COVID. It's also for some of the health challenges arising out of this COVID period, and also our preparedness. I mean, we just discovered that if you look at our research centers, it was during COVID that we discovered really that we did not have enough of them. And the few who could be doing this for us had exceptional pressure coming on them. So if you look at the facility and the things it would do, they are generally supposed to help the health sector. I was a bit unhappy that it turned out that we couldn't approve that facility. But fortunately, it wasn't rejected. What I think especially our colleagues from the minority said was that the finance minister should come and account. I see a lot of accountability reports on the COVID expenditures in the last budget. So I don't know what kind of accountability again people seek, but to the extent that the minister wants this done and to the extent that the House seems to have stepped it down, means that the minister may have to come and clarify maybe some of the things that have been put in the...
I use 50 cedis for this, 25 cedis
for that. There's a lot of it. I mean,
500,000 for this, that kind of thing.
In fact, before even the usage of those funds, approval was sought from Parliament.
Yeah, and I know there was, I remember there was a table that was
a table of what the money would go. But
so, but after the spending.
So maybe they have the things deviate from the plan, and again, a lot of that has already been answered in the budget. So real actuals have been provided in the budget. But if people still want some details and some clarifications, it's okay. I think that would be done, and then we can approve that facility. But I do not support the proposition that Parliament legislators should begin to take on the role of auditors and seek to audit. Sometimes it is because those matters are mixed with political objectives, and after the close of 2020, coming into 2021, there was a general feeling that Ghana had managed COVID quite well, and understandably, the government took a lot of advantage of that general view, and so maybe it is time for the opposition to also say, well, you had your fill when you had the praises for the way COVID went, so we also take advantage of this and spoil the game a little bit for you. That's how I see it. Otherwise, I don't see why we want politicians to turn into auditors and to audit government expenditure. And finally, why COVID? Look, if you look at the amount of money that has gone into COVID, you can compare it with the amount of money that has gone into a lot of things. A lot of money that have come into Parliament, that have gone to finance additional constituencies we have created, additional districts we have created.
So there's no reason why there should be a special focus on COVID.
Exactly.
19 billion cities we're talking about.
But that's why I say
the last count.
Well, I agree that it's big, but there are bigger. Look, the financial sector cleanup so far has taken some 25 billion.
True.
I can cite several other expenditure lines that are really huge. Look, our wage bill year on year is growing. Our interest payments are also growing. Why don't we want to commit an audit into these lines?
Because government blames the current economic hardships in the country on COVID and Russia and Ukraine recently. Well, so obviously from the political side, the minority would want to hit at these things.
Well, I've seen government, and I have heard my own self complain a lot about the interest payments, and which is why we begin to push for domestic revenue measures that would replace that. Okay. So government is also blaming some of the problems on the borrowing we are compelled to do because we're not paying enough taxes. And in the discussion for the e-levy, I heard a lot of points being made by government that we can't continue borrowing. So maybe you may also want to take a look at interest payment arising out of that borrowing, because government is putting some of the blame on borrowing and its consequences for the economy. I just think that we should allow the Auditor General to do its work, but to the extent that the House seemed to have stepped down that particular request because it required some clarification, that's how I'll call it, of the accounting that the Minister for Finance has already done to us through the budget. I think the minister should come, or a representative of the minister should come, or a statement should be presented to. They may not need to come. They may file a statement with Parliament, so that if that satisfies the curiosity or the concerns of those who raised it, then we can pass that facility. But that facility, for somebody like me who have sat at the center of government treasury before, and I know how expensive borrowing could be when you go to the commercial market. If you have a concessional facility like this, you definitely don't allow it to go. And I would plead with the House, even wish that we pass this one. And if there are other requests before Parliament that are not as critical as this one, that people want to do some politics on, or want to bring the finance minister to account for something, that would be for me more comfortable. But this is this particular facility, I think, must be passed so that we can have that, if you like, cheap money or affordable money. When I say cheap or affordable money, it's money with very low interest rates and with very favorable terms, that in effect, it's almost like half the money was given to you free of charge, and then half you have to repay at a subsidized rate. That's not the kind of facility that you let go. And my prayer is that we're able to get that facility passed as quickly as we can.
Okay. I actually had time to talk about your constituency, but we've run out of time. So thank you very much, Yoram Kwatin, for your time. Yeah, so we'll take you now to the floor of the House for question time with the Minister for Works and Housing on matters of rent and the Blekusu Sea Defense Project.
Thank you for indulging me with a supplementary question to the Minister's answer on rent. Mr. Speaker, the Minister in his answer is talking about digitalizing rent control. And Mr. Speaker, as I heard the Minister, the law provides that rent payable shall not exceed 6 months. But in practice, we know that landlords demand rent in advance of 1 year, 2 years, 3 years. What steps is the Minister taking to enforce the Rent Act? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'm very much aware of the issues raised by the Honorable Minority Leader, and it's come about because of some market failures in the rental segment of the housing sector. And it's because we have a very huge housing deficit. The demand outstrips supply. Supply outstrips demand. And as a result, there's a market failure. So it has become necessary, in the light of what is happening, to review the Rent Act. And that's one of the main reasons why we are taking the necessary steps to review the Rent Act. At this stage, we are working with the Attorney General and also receiving proposals from all stakeholders. So if the Honorable Minority Leader has any suggestions at this stage, it will be very much welcome, so that we can have a very up-to-date rent law that can stand the test of time.
Thanks for tolerating me. So, Mr. Minister, is it demand and supply which is regulating rent payable, or the Rent Act?
Thank you very much. It's not the demand and supply. In fact, the Rent Act is very clear on that. But Mr. Speaker, because of the deficit in the housing sector, it puts the landlords in an advantageous position, and therefore they are able to dictate what should be the duration of the rent advance. For instance, because it puts them in an advantage, it makes them conduct themselves in an opportunistic manner. I think I mentioned this during my vetting. And therefore, if I give you 6 months and you tell me that you cannot afford, there are a host of others who will come and see me behind the scene and take the rent, say, in 3 years.
Significantly address current challenges in the rental housing industry. Can the Minister tell us some of the challenges and how the review is seeking to address them?
I mentioned these challenges, and it's because of the demand and supply imbalances, and the fact that the Rent Act, which was passed some 60 years ago, has basically outlived its usefulness. So this is the time for us to look at the current challenges we are facing in the housing sector, rental housing sector, so that we can make the necessary suggestions in the new Rent Act.
Reinforcing the Rent Act.
The deficit is creating imbalance, demand and supply imbalance, and it is inhibiting government's effort at implementing the current Rent Act. I think I've made this point even from the beginning. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, I rise to ask Minister for Works and Housing the status of the Phase 2 of the Blekusu Sea Defense Wall in the Ketu South municipality.
Mr. Speaker, the Ministry of Works and Housing is taking urgent steps towards the construction of the second phase of the Blekusu Sea Defense Project to mitigate the risks of coastal erosion and flooding of the communities along the coastal stretch due to intense tidal wave action. Beaches along the Blekusu coastal stretch are narrow and are eroding at an alarming rate because of tidal wave action. Some communities along this coastal stretch often experience flooding in the event of wave overstopping. These have impacted negatively on lives, livelihoods, and property. Mr. Speaker, to mitigate beach erosion and flooding of communities along the Blekusu coastal stretch, the Ministry of Works and Housing, from July 2015 to July 2019, engaged Measures Amandi Holdings Limited to complete the first phase of the Blekusu Coastal Protection Project. The works entailed the construction of 23 armor rock groins to protect a coastal stretch of 4,300 meters. That's 4.3 kilometers. Mr. Speaker, the works done under the first phase has functioned effectively to protect the people, while enhancing fishing activities, which is the main source of livelihood for the affected communities. Mr. Speaker, in my previous response to this same question to this August House, I indicated that the Ministry of Works and Housing noted the urgent need to undertake the second phase of the Blekusu Coastal Protection Project and therefore commissioned technical feasibility study focused on Blekusu communities to enable Mrs. Amandi continue with the second phase of the project. However, Mr. Speaker, in accordance with the Public Financial Management, Public Investment Management Regulation, LI 2411, a more comprehensive feasibility study is now required. In that direction, the Minister for Works and Minister for Finance, in the 2022 budget statement, allocated 10 million cedis towards a comprehensive feasibility studies of Blekusu and the surrounding communities. Subsequently, my ministry is engaging Ministry of Finance for the release of the funds to enable the Hydrological Service Department undertake additional feasibility. I wish to indicate to this honorable member for Cape 2 South, Mr. Speaker, and this House, that my ministry will not relent in our effort to enhance the resilience of our coastal communities to erosion and flooding.
Hello and welcome back from the break. This is Dukes U. This week, I'm troubled at some happenings in the northern part of our country, the 5 regions of the north, there are issues that I think that Parliament can contribute in resolving the issues. It's about the state of insecurity in some regions of the north, if I may put it that way. Already we know of the long-standing matter of Boko, its chieftaincy conflict, and the matters that have been generated over the years. I mean, that always they've had to review curfew situations. I mean, there's a standing unit of the military there and all of that. So it's something that's been going on for a while now. And my point of entry into this is, I mean, the comments that the Speaker made following the report laid by the Defense and Interior Committee on the breakdown of military-civilian relations and the subsequent military brutality in Wa by the military last year. Of course, the report was delayed because this incident happened in July 2021, but it was considered by Parliament and even given an even bigger remit to the committee. The Speaker's directives indicated that a bigger remit had even been given to the committee, and this was in June, almost a year after it happened. Of course, it's a matter that has been put to rest a long time ago. The people were supposed to be stripped of their ranks. They've been stripped. The Ministry of Defense, the Ghana Army has already done that. The issue of compensation has already been talked about, medical bills and all of that. But Parliament's committee took a long time in dealing with that. But that's not really my concern. That's just a point of entry. At the end of it, we saw the Speaker make far-reaching comments, even about the military and police and national security operatives brutalizing citizens and all of that, and how Parliament will not tolerate that going forward. I think that was a brilliant, summation of the views, the polls, and the feelings, and what Ghanaians actually want to tell our security agencies to protect us and not to brutalize us, essentially. So that's a good one. But I am troubled about other things apart from this in the northern part of Ghana. There's this issue of the lawyer who was killed on the Bole Bamboy Highway this week. The past week. He was on his way to Jirapa, his constituency, his village, to spend some time, brutally murdered in the early hours of the day, 300 meters away from a police barrier. That's just one. Almost every week, we hear of incidents of women traveling to Burkina Faso to buy tomatoes or to buy some agri-produce to bring back to sell, who encounter who deal with armed robbers, who deal with violent crime on almost a weekly basis going there. We're gradually making the highways and the roads to the north gradually untravelable and unpassable because of the activities of these criminals and violent crime and armed robbers. As a matter of urgency, and as a matter of national importance, something needs to be done about the situation in the northern part of the country. And Parliament has a role to play. The Minister of Interior must be summoned. The IGP must be summoned. The Minister for National Security must be summoned to brief the people's representatives about whether this matter has gotten into their attention and what they are doing about it. Because if care is not taken, it will get to a point in time after a certain period or after a certain point, people will not travel to that part of the country anymore. Already they are dealing with a lot of challenges. There's high incidence of poverty and so many other challenges that Northern Ghana is dealing with. To add insecurity to that and to make it one of the bigger issues in that part of the country would be unbearable. It would be too bad. And that's where I think Parliament has a role to play. The Defense and Interior Committee of the House needs to take a judicial notice, needs to take parliamentary notice of these issues. Parliament as a House needs to take a notice of this. The MPs in those areas concerned, the caucuses, need to do something about it to ensure that the attention of the managers of our security and of our defense systems nationwide, their mind is brought to these issues, and the necessary resources, the tools for the police, for the army, even if we need to put people there, checkpoints at every point on these roads, to check the spate of violent crime and armed robbery in the north. Something needs to be done about it urgently, and Parliament must play a role in getting that done. That's my view for the week. And that's how we end Duke's view this week, and by extension the Chamber, right here on CCTV. My name is Duke Mensah-Opoku. Same time next week on the same channel, we'll be back with another interesting edition.